Morning, Rotarians and guests. I'm Ron Scroll, Sergeant at Arms. Our invocation this morning is by Bill Toten.
Thank you, Ron. Heavenly Father, we come to you today in our common mission of service above self, asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this meeting. Help us to engage in our meaningful work. Allow us to grow closer as a group and nurture the bonds of community. Fill us with your grace, O Lord, as we make decisions that will better the community we serve. And continue to remind us that what we do here today, all that we accomplish, is for the pursuit of the truth of the greater glory of you and for the service of humanity. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic justice for all. Okay. So before we test of the things we think, say, and do. 1. Is it true? 2. Is it fair to all concerned? 3. Will it build goodwill and better friendships? 4. Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Our president, Matt Shearer.
Thank you very much, Ron. So our quote to start our meeting today: there can be no keener revelation of the society's soul than the way it treats its children. Nelson Mandela. And it will be fitting with our topic that we're going to be our program today. I'd like to ask for a moment of silence for the passing of Louise Sutton. She was the spouse of Ginny and a good friend to Mrs. Claus. So if you'd all take a moment to remember. Thank you, everybody. This month, we are still taking donations to help purchase the van for the Afghan refugees in North Hill. If you're interested in participating with that, get your contributions to Terry Fortnight. Starting next week, which will be February, we're collecting books, so children's and young adult books in English that will be sent to Nigeria. So if you have any books at home that you want to clear, make shelf space, we'll be collecting those books starting next week. There will be a foundation meeting immediately following today's club meeting. And I'd like to call up Kelly Brennan to give us a Scout Cabin update. What do you do from there?
Oh, okay, yeah. We have, that's a problem, James. This thing doesn't seem to function well. So we have, to date, we're pretty close to getting close to our goal. In cash, we have roughly $21,000 that we've raised in donations. In pledges, we've raised about $132,000 in pledges, which puts us, as of this was Monday night, at about $153,000 of the $200,000 that we're looking to raise. So making good progress. We do have, and with the assistance of Printers Devil, pledge cards. So if anybody is in need of a pledge card, I've got them. I'll be more than happy to hand them out. And that's kind of it. Anybody have any questions? I'd be more than happy to answer them as well. Although, I guess. So if anybody has any questions, run me down. Yes, so pavers, if you wanted to buy a paver, what Catherine was asking is how do you do a paver? Pavers you can do directly within our website for Hudson Rotary. It'll take you directly to a page. You can do everything that you need to do from cradle to grave. We keep track of those. And then we'll be laying those pavers once we've sold the last paver. And there are 500 that were earmarked to lay and to sell. You can do either or. Yep, either or. So this will get you from the same place. The website will do the same thing. If you want to make a donation, you can do it on the website. Or if you want to buy a paver, you can do it on the website as well. This could be for any amount. We give you some guidance in the pledge cards, but if there, obviously, anything that you can contribute, because everybody's situation is certainly different, we'd be more than happy to accept. Yeah, so there are 3 societies. You'll see it on the website. Our website, I got a shout out to Evan. He's right behind me. Fantastic job. You can navigate through there without any challenges whatsoever. Whatever you're looking to do, even if it's just exploring what's going on with the cabin, Evan's got all of that taken care of, and he's done a fantastic job. There are 3 societies that we created. The first one being the need glasses now or thicker. The 1953 Society, the 1931 Society, and the 1919 Society. 30 and 50. Those were the societies where the cabin was built. In 1919 is when Scouts were created. So the 1919 is a $10,000 contribution. The 53 is a 1,000, and then the 1931 is 5,000. Thank you. Thanks, Evan. Or thanks, Tom. Yeah, sure can. So if anybody would need a card, I didn't want to take up a zillion minutes of time. If anybody needs one, just find me. I'm more than happy to take care of that for you. Thank you, everybody. Leave this on.
So getting ready to start doing some advertising in the hub. So that'll start going out in the community for that total does has penciled in the request that we've made that they've made to the foundation for the cabin too. So we're not quite to the full goal, but we have that number penciled in. So all right, Mike, membership update.
Do I have the podium or from here?
Where would you like?
I prefer for anyone. Come to the phone.
Yeah, good.
I prefer that too. That's good. Okay. Very good. Yeah. You want to go first slide? Yeah.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Time for a quick membership update. Actually, so we've ended another quarter in our Rotary year. And we wanted to go back and take a look at where we are and where we want to be, how we plan to get there, and what you can do to help. Same format as we've used in the past. First of all, we have flatlined on membership after some years of excellent growth. In fact, we were one of the top in the district growth-wise. But things have really leveled off, and it's no coincidence that the numbers coincide with the years of the pandemic. So that has had a big impact on membership, with people basically concerned about getting out and about. If we look at it on a Rotary quarterly basis, in the first quarter, we were at 63. We've had some attrition, and we've cleaned up our membership rolls from members that had not been showing up for some time. And we added 3 members in the second quarter, so we've ended up at a net of 60 right back where we started. So we're back to 60 at the end of the year. Where do we want to be? Well, our goal all along has been 72. And that goal came from the strategic plan that the membership committee developed back before the pandemic started. And we decided to keep that goal in place and try not to use the pandemic as an excuse. But things really have been tough, as the numbers show. And we are now, whereas at the end of the first quarter, Rotary year quarter, we were on track. We add 3 per quarter, we would have reached the goal by July. But this second quarter has really hurt, and we're back where we started. So basically what we're saying is over the next 6 months, we have to add 12 members and not lose anybody. That's a, as Rich Warfield would agree, that's a tough part. So what are our action plans? And these are what they have been. We're continuing our local publicity efforts. So those are headed up by Jay, and he's actually got something coming out fairly soon in the Hudson Hub. Another article that'll get us more exposure, but we've been doing a lot of that, and that has helped attract some of the new members actually that we've gotten over the past year or so. We've got the new member information folder that Chris keeps at the desk when we sign in, or anyone who wants to pick one up that has a guest coming that they can hand out to the guest. We're working to increase our exposure within the community by giving us more credit for things that we do, with more awareness of things that Rotary does in the community. But the cornerstone of our plans for membership growth has been to get our members more involved. Because actually, each member, if we're in this to serve the community, and I think 99.9% of us are in this for service, to help serve the community, then if we are, each member has a responsibility to help the club grow and succeed in its mission to serve. The club can't serve if we don't grow and expand our capabilities and our resources. So how can you help? Well, number one, use our speakers to attract guests. And we're trying to publish in advance who our speakers will be down the line so that you can see that and invite people and try to match up the speakers with the interests of our guests that you might know about, friends of yours. Invite guests to join us on Zoom. They don't have to actually physically be at the meeting. We talk about the new member folder for a guest, and then we'll track how we're doing and publish updates quarterly, which we're doing right now. So the main thing is invite somebody to join Rotary. That's key. And think about it every time you're at a meeting. Who would I like to have in this organization? And get creative. Try to invite somebody to every meeting that we have a guest speaker. So that's it. Thank you. That's our report. Pat.
Thanks, Mike. So membership is the lifeblood of a Rotary club, so it's important that we continuously are bringing in new members, because other members leave for whatever other reason. So invite somebody to join Rotary. And we're now ready for our program today. And our program today will be put on by past District Governor John Reyes. So John's become our club program this month. He talked to us earlier about the foundation, and today he'll be talking to us about Rotary's Youth Protection Plan, which is something that's being rolled out to our entire district and will involve a number of our different projects that we have involving youth members. So, John?
I hope I am unmuted. I did get that prompt. Are we, if somebody could give me a high sign if you can hear me, that would be good. All right. Well, Evan and Jim did that, so I think I do have some volume. Good morning. It is very nice to be with you.
We can barely hear you. Are your speakers or your?
Speakers are right in front of.
Maybe if you could turn your volume up. I mean, you're unmuted. So John, go ahead and unmute and put your camera on. We could hear you, but it was very quiet.
All right, are we doing any better? I'm getting a text for a whatever from Evan that he can hear me. And from Thomas that it's loud and clear, but I'm not sure that I'm loud and clear where you're at, so I'm not sure how to deal with that, frankly.
Well, that's okay. So we're turning. Okay, you're sounding a lot better right now.
Okay. Well, that's good because this is about as good as I get. To come right down to it. But it is, I am delighted to be here. And by the way, if I could tail off on your membership question, I have attempted to send a member to you, a prospective new member to you. One of my associates here at Buckingham, Andy Zellers. I know Evan is working on that, and I hope that'll come to pass. That has nothing to do with youth protection, but maybe it'll be helpful to you. Special thanks, by the way, to Jim Ahern and to Evan for inviting me to speak on what I think is an important topic and frankly, an increasingly important topic. In Rotary, of course, we have a tremendous focus on youth. We'll talk a little bit about some of the specifics for your club later. But because of that focus, safety, of course, is a critical issue. Youth protection is a critical issue. If you think about it on a broad basis, in this district alone, we have over 30 Interact clubs that are active. We have a very active RILA program, which is, of course, a week-long activity on the Baldwin-Wallace campus. We do a very robust four-way speech contest. Youth Exchange has been dormant for a couple of years with COVID, but if you're watching the emails, you know that that's about to come back live again. Various clubs do all sorts of things. Cleveland Club is well known for its YES program. That's another multi-day program that's done on board a tall ship with a lot of youth protection challenges. The Akron Club, of course, has a camp for children with special needs. Lots of us do the Speaker of the Month program and so on. In our district, historically, we've had a very robust youth protection program for Youth Exchange. For those of you who may be involved, I had to sit through the training when I was becoming governor. Every host family member, any adult that lives in that house has to have a complete criminal background check, go through some extensive training. Our own district folks have to do that. The students are put through extensive training on what kind of conduct they shouldn't have to tolerate and what to do if they encounter it. Unfortunately, once you got beyond that, we really were not keeping up. To be frank with you, our district is probably about 10 years behind what has been in place in other districts. And what I will describe today is in place in in every district in the state of California, as well as several other states. And we are not trying to recreate the wheel. We are borrowing a wheel that's been functioning quite well. One of the reasons it's coming up now is RI, Rotary International, has added an emphasis to its longstanding commitment to youth safety. And to be candid with you again, as I was about to become governor, as district governor-elect, we encountered a very serious youth protection problem in the form of a youth upon youth assault at a Rotary event. And to be blunt, This is not, for me at least at this point, simply checking a box because RI wants us to. It's a very real question, a very real issue. Our insurance rates, Rotary International, have gone up, and that's not too hard to understand. If you look at some of the large sexual abuse settlements, they drive rate increases. The Boy Scouts are in Chapter 11 right now, and they are in the process of having a $2.6 billion settlement program created to deal with over 82,000 claims that have been filed. The Mormon Church has about a $250 million settlement program in process. USC, 1.1 billion. University of Michigan, 490 million, among many others. Our underwriters for the insurance carriers that we work with through Rotary International see each of the 7,528 clubs in the United States and the 150 districts in the United States as a potential payout. And that comes from their publications, not just from my imagination. As a part of the underwriting review process, which occurs annually for Rotary, they assessed Rotary International's youth safety guidelines. And they're out there. Those you can find on the RI site on My Rotary. Although in years gone by, we have distributed that. At least I know I did, Beverly did as we were coming in to being governor, to all of our presidents-elect. It's fairly widely circulated information. They approve those, and they are, in a sense, a condition of the insurance coverage that we receive. And I would like to quote one sentence out of that risk management group's report, and it is a quote. This means that adopting the youth protection policies programs set forth this is a tough morning, the Rotary Youth Protection Guide for tutoring programs, Interact, RILA, and the Youth Exchange Program, and any other activities involving youth is essential to maintaining the broad insurance coverage that has historically been available under the program. And of course, to bring it down to club level, that is the insurance that covers your club and any and all youth activities that you may be involved in. They haven't narrowed coverage yet, but they have made it more complicated. As of June 1, 2021, the nature of our insurance changed. And if you have agents or insurance specialists in your club, they can explain this in more detail than fits in this program. But we went from an occurrence policy to a claims made policy. And in a somewhat oversimplified explanation, that means that you need to report any suspected claim, even if it doesn't come in formally, during the insurance year that it occurs. And that's very difficult with youth claims. If a child is treated inappropriately at, say, the age of 15, statute of limitations for their claim does not begin to run until they become an adult at 18, and then there can be 1 or 2 more years. So the insurance environment has become more complex, and I think we need to be aware of it and adjust to it. But to come back to the challenges at hand, another indicator that we're a little bit behind is the state of Ohio enacted a statute that became effective on March 22 of 2001. So Ohio Revised Code section 109.574. And interestingly enough, that statute provides that all volunteers, and that is in essence almost any Rotary Club member, who has unsupervised access to youth, and we'll talk about what unsupervised means in a minute, shall, not may, shall be told that they can be fingerprinted and a criminal background check can be run on them at any time. That has been the law of Ohio for well over 10 years. A failure to give that notice and a failure to actually run the checks can cause a loss of the limited statutory immunity that law provides for a club like yours and all of the clubs in the district, which increases the risk of a successful lawsuit, successful claim. if you back up a little bit and compare what our district does with youth exchange versus what virtually all of our clubs, including my own, do with regard to our other youth activities, you find, unfortunately, a gap. The youth exchange requirements are substantial, as I alluded to earlier. We use them. They are effectively a standard of care that we need to meet for all of our activity. And the combination of those things led us to adopt a new youth protection and a comprehensive youth protection policy almost 2 years ago now. It's on the district website. Many of you have likely read it. If you want to read it, as I say, it's there. If you have trouble with that, Cheryl Warren, the district webmaster, can help you with that. RI has substantial additional related resources that can be reviewed. Those are on my Rotary. Both Cheryl Warren and Ryan Knotts of the Hillcrest Club are a whiz at getting into that if you have any issues there. The district policy that I'm about to spend a little bit of time with, of course, is patterned on the RI policy in no small part because it's well tested, and in no small part because the insurance carriers support it. All right. We're not asking you to memorize that plan, but your club officers, your club youth protection officer, and hopefully a youth protection committee need to have a very good working knowledge of that. And it is available. It's time to start building that knowledge at this point. Policy is designed to help you spot issues, plan events so as to avoid problems, and to give you guidance on what to do if a problem does in fact arise. Implementation of the policy is fairly far along. Some of you know because some of you attended. I think Jim attended, as a matter of fact. We've done a substantial orientation for this policy. We've done it virtually on 2 occasions, August 18 of 2021 and again on September 18 of 2021. That orientation program that's about 1 hour and 10 minutes long is also recorded and on the district website. I would encourage you to look at that. It covers the entire policy step at a time, and some of the supporting materials that are included in the appendices to the policy are also reviewed. And there are several factual patterns, several hypothetical problems that are reviewed that can be helpful in thinking about how you need to deal with events as you put them together. Some of the things that need to be done, you've already done. As I understand it, Jim Ahern and Patricia, and I may mispronounce your name, I apologize, Getz is the way I would pronounce it, have both signed up to be youth protection officers. I thank them both very much. Thank your club for being on top of that. That training process is underway because you have somebody else in your club who's heavily involved in this. There is a district youth protection officer, and unfortunately we lost our district youth protection officer to COVID. She's been ill for months and is unable to undertake the job. So we have a new one. Carrie Lysing from the Stowe Monroe Falls Club is within the last month taken on that position. Some guy named Evan McCauley has agreed to and has taken on the assistant's position for the district as well. And I thank him, and I hope you will too. Where we are at in implementation with Carrie and Evan in particular is it will be their job to train your club youth protection officers and how to roll out this whole program. They did their first training session, I believe it was on January 13th, and we'll be doing follow-up on that. We hope to roll out the training for youth protection officers in all of the clubs by March. That is our target, and then start opening it up to all members probably somewhere in the second quarter, probably close to June, because that'll be a larger task. One thing you can focus in on now, particularly your club youth protection officers, is a question on who is going to need what kind of training. And we'll look at that in detail in a minute, and I'll ask whoever was going to help me with the tech to share the screen at this point on my one-page diagram, if it's possible to do that. If it doesn't show up, that's all right. I mentioned earlier that there's a state statute that deals with unsupervised access to children. And there are essentially three definitions that you're going to need to look at to figure out how you should vet a given person in your club depending upon their level of involvement. And the state's definition of unsupervised access to children is one of those three definitions. It's found, for those out there taking notes, in Ohio Revised Code section 109-574. All right, and unsupervised access to a child by law in the state of Ohio means that the person in question has access to a child and either of the following applies. 1, no other person 18 years of age or older is present in the same room with the child. 2, if outdoors, and this is where it becomes complex, frankly, if no other person 18 years of age or older is within a 30-yard radius of the child or has visual contact with the child. For the purposes of this talk, if you have folks in your club who are involved in activities that would be unsupervised under either of those portions of the definition, they probably should have the detailed vetting that we're going to move to next. You also want to look at paragraph 4 of the district's youth protection policy, because we have our own Rotary approved definitions that parallel this. We look at Rotary volunteers as either those who would have casual contact or those who would have continued contact. To narrow it down and make it simple, casual contact is essentially incidental and infrequent group contact where there's no reasonably foreseeable risk of abuse or harassment. All right. There we go. So if you have a volunteer who's simply going to show up at the club meeting when the scholarship recipient is there to receive it, they're probably a casual contact type of volunteer. And the youth protection policy requires different kinds of background workup depending upon whether you're in this category or continued contact that we'll talk about next. And continued contact in simplified form is significant and unsupervised one-to-one contact. Okay, it follows that unsupervised contact language in the revised code. So if you are one of those casual contact volunteers, and if you're looking at the diagram on the screen, only the parts highlighted in yellow will affect you. In your club YPO, all right, that will be Patricia and Jim, will let us know at the district who your volunteers are, and they'll identify them by name, email, and type of contact. Are they casual or are they more involved and continued? If they tell us to put you in the casual contact pigeonhole, then you will get an email, all right? The district sends the email to the volunteer. You can put in club member there, it's a synonym. There's a training course, doesn't take very long. It's done online. You go through it. There's a quiz at the end. You take it, you pass it, and by the way, you can retake it if you need to. That result is automatically reported back to the district youth protection officer. And if you're a casual contact person, you're done. You're ready to go. Pretty simple. And by the way, there is no cost to the club or the club member for that. The district bears the cost of that. And in fact, we've paid over $5,000 to get access to the software that does all of this. On the other hand, if you're a more heavily involved volunteer, maybe you're the Interact advisor, maybe you are taking part actively in RILA or four-way speech, or you're involved with your Interact club when you do a cleanup at the park, or go to other activities, a ball game where there's going to be some fairly extended contact and so forth. Your club youth protection officer should be identifying you as a continued contact volunteer. And that's a bit more involved. For the continued contact volunteer, you look on the left side of the chart here where it's not highlighted. And the district sends a generic email to the volunteer with a link to an application. The volunteer, that is the club member, Evan, for instance, submits a completed application, all right, which is with a link to the Youth Volunteer Management System. And that's the training, by the way, that Evan's undertaking right now. That system will automatically do a couple of things for your more involved volunteer. That YVM system will send a link to the volunteer for a background check. Now, to put that in context, we've been doing background checks for well over 10 years for youth exchange. It's not new. And the IntelliCorp entity that's referenced here is the company we've been using for 10 years. We chose them for a couple of reasons. One, they're relatively inexpensive. Two, we have a history with them. And three, they've done nice work for us. When you submit the background check, because that's done online as well, all right, the company then runs the background check and reports back. And if there's a problem, as you can see in the next box, and it's not a clear report, you get a pre-adverse letter, which goes to the volunteer, who can then respond to that within 10 days, and we can look at it further. Once you either go straight through or we do the follow-up, you're likely to end up with an approval. Situations may exist where that can't be done, but you're likely to get that. The system automatically reports that to the district with the approval. Parallel path occurs at the same time. The Youth Volunteer Management System sends an email to references. When the volunteer applies, we ask you to identify 3 references and their contact information. And the system automatically reaches out to them to fill in a form. It comes back to the district, and the district youth protection officers review that. The YVM system also sends an email to the club YPO, again, that would be Patricia or Jim, to do a volunteer interview. And that's also done online. There's a link and a form, and that goes to the district for review. And finally, the YVM sends a link to the volunteer to take that youth protection training course that we talked about 5 minutes ago for everybody else, and you take the quiz and you move on. All right. So those are your 2 different paths. The bottom of this kind of splits up who has to do what. If you look on the right, there's a somewhat short list of things that your club YPO ends up doing, okay, in this vetting process. The key one is to update the district by listing your folks as either being a continued contact volunteer or a casual contact volunteer, so we get them in the right hole. The club YPO does need to do the interview and the report, and then help track the status, because they'll get the reports on this. The rest of it, frankly, is done at the district level. We've incurred the cost of getting into the system. We need to maintain it. We are still creating the training module for youth. We also have the primary responsibility to do the various evaluations and monitor the progress of those evaluations. There is one cost, all right, that will come back down to the club level. The cost for the criminal background check is the only one that the district doesn't bear. Currently, IntelliCorp is charging $13 a background check. We anticipate that's going to go to $18 a background check. This kind of goes backward in my presentation and reaches back to one of the reasons why I suggest it's very wise for your club YPO and their supporting committee to evaluate each member of the club, because it's unlikely it'll be necessary for every member of the club to go through that continued contact process and do the background check and incur the expense. All right. So you want to have a blend there of being safe, all right, but not causing a cost, even if it is only $18, where you don't need it. And having that analysis done early will help when we move along. That's kind of the complex part. And at this point, I'd kind of like to focus a little bit more on your club. Your club is rather involved with youth, actually. From the limited information I have, and somebody can correct me where I go wrong, I do believe you have sponsored and continue to sponsor an Interact Club. I think that may be with Western Reserve Academy. Somebody can nod their head and tell me I'm wrong, but that's the information I received. I think you've also got a scholarship program. You've been historically involved in the youth exchange program and four-way speech almost every year as well. So you do have a good commitment to youth. Be encouraged and congratulated on that. And now we just kind of need to put the other shoe on and make sure that we're doing all of that as safely as we reasonably can. At that point, I would stop and thank you again. And I'm willing, if there is time, to take any questions that you may want to send my way. I have not been monitoring the chat. I don't know if there are any in there. If there are, Evan, if you could let me know. And otherwise, you can ask them, or you can have whoever's moderating the meeting ask them, because as I understand it, I probably won't be able to hear a question from the audience.
Hey, John, that's an outstanding analysis. Thank you for doing that. On your chart, looks like it's a one-time type of analysis or checking of the background. What is involved in the ongoing side of it, where an individual is approved and then subsequently has a problem? How is that tracked and identified?
Well, if I'd have paid more attention to my notes, I'd have told you the answer to that already. The background check has to be done every year.
Every year? Okay, good. I see. Thank you.
For whatever it's worth, I started doing this for Ohio Youth Soccer Association North back in 2001 when that statute came into being that I read to you much earlier. And what I saw there and in other youth-related organizations is their criteria evolved. Some did no background checks. Some did it every 5 years, every 2 years. This current status is the vast majority of entities, including our youth exchange, by the way, does it every year. So that's the standard we adopted for that.
John, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
This is Jim Ahern. Thank you, first of all, for doing this for us. And also I wanted to, besides Patricia, Mimi Becker and Joe Avella also are on our committee. Joe's on it mainly because he's been exposed to the youth exchange program as well. But I do have a question. As we go through and identify our Rotarians as either casual or continued contact, I can see where we're going to have a situation where it won't be clear which side it fits on. So do we want to err on the side of any potential whatsoever for continued contact, or how do you make that? What are your thoughts on how you make that decision rather than just err on the side of safety and you make everybody? There are a lot of people do it. Is not the right answer.
Right. If I had either a magic wand or a crystal ball, I could give you a really good answer for this. But I have neither. I just have my lawyer's conservatism. And my lawyer's conservatism is, and having represented a number of youth-related organizations, you're better to have erred on the side of bringing in a few too many people that you really didn't need to than not. Because this doesn't mean anything until something goes wrong. And when something goes wrong, and you missed somebody, you didn't run them through, and they ended up with that kind of contact, and maybe that's because their role changed over time. This is not a static thing. You know, your committee is going to be looking at this every year at least. It's a whole lot easier to defend yourself if you ran them through and got a clean report than if you didn't run them through and you would have found something. So there's no bright red line, but to the extent that there's a fuzzy red line, I would say stay on the safe side.
Okay. All right.
I wish I had a better answer for that, but that's about the best I can do on that one.
That's what I figured your answer would be.
Well, yeah, I'm a lawyer. There's no real surprise there.
Okay.
And I do apologize, by the way. I cannot imagine my presentation this morning is going to drive an increase in your membership, but I still appreciate being here.
Thanks. John, earlier at the beginning, you mentioned when you were defining the types of contact, you mentioned unsupervised in the definition. What does that mean? What's the difference between supervised and unsupervised? A parent is available or a teacher is around or what?
No, it's much more generic than that. Let's go back. This is where lawyers can drive you nuts, but there is literally a statutory definition. The Ohio legislature decided in its wisdom to define it for us. The governor signed the law. As I said, it's been around since about 2001. And let's go back through that, all right? Unsupervised access to children. That's a defined term in Ohio Revised Code Section 109.574, subparagraph B, okay, if you want to look it up. And I'm going to quote it for you because it's pretty much what I did before. Unsupervised access to a child means that the person, not a parent, but the person, and I would put in the word volunteer or club member here if it helps you understand it better, that the person in question has access to a child, that means anybody under the age of 18, by the way, and that either of the following applies. And the first one, subparagraph 1, is basically for an indoor setting, all right? So imagine whatever room you're in now, you're the only person in the room over 18, and there is a child in the room that is someone under the age of 18. That's it. Nobody else is there. That's unsupervised conduct or contact. You could have 10 of those children in there under 18 and one adult. It's all unsupervised contact. If you're outside, and this is where, quite frankly, I did some real interesting hypotheticals with soccer coaches trying to run soccer practices. If you can imagine that, that becomes a very complex environment. If you're outdoors and there's no other person 18 years of age or older within 30 yards or with visual contact, it's unsupervised, okay? The second adult, to come back to your question, does not have to be a parent, a guardian. It can be anybody, okay? So you could have Patricia and Evan, who happen to be on my screen as the first two people I see. If you put them both in the room or both on the field with visual contact or within 30 yards, you no longer have unsupervised contact, and you have met the standard to get limited immunity. Now, that may not be enough for you. You may want more safety than that, and that's reasonable, but you've met the minimum standard that way, okay? And notice that avoids not all liability, okay? It avoids only negligence, but it's a standard that you need to be aware of.
Hey, John, is just curious, is that what you just described in Ohio law? Is that spelled out in the Rotary Youth Protection Policies and Procedures, that 23-page document, or is that not in there?
That particular quote is not in there. If you go to paragraph 4, you will find the two definitions that we use. And we did not adopt simply the statute because there's a little bit more complexity in the district, we thought. And secondly, our insurance underwriters have approved the two definitions that are in the policy. And I have those. I can read them to you word for word, and anybody who's not asleep already will be. But they are important. They may be boring, but they're important. But I think the way you best understand them is casual contact really means you're not going to be around a person enough, even in a group setting, to groom them, okay? And there's no chance of one-on-one contact, no realistic chance of one-on-one contact. Anytime you have a realistic chance of one-on-one contact, if they're going to be somewhere overnight, the RILA program, for instance, then yeah, you got to have it. You got to have it. You got to do the whole 9 yards and get the background check, get the references, get all of that done.
I've got a question. The answer's probably obvious, but we do a lot of work with the Service Learning Group, and once a year we go to the Girl Scout camp and either knock down tents or paint inside buildings and things like that. And usually there's one adult going into a cabin with 3 or 4 people painting the interior, or one person, helping knock down tents here and people doing things otherwise. That means we've now got to have 2 people with each group.
Well, actually you have 2 choices, all right? One would be what you just said. Make sure it's 2 people, 2 18-year-olds plus, or or make sure that if it's going to be one person, that they have been through the full vetting process, including the criminal background check. Now, as just a matter of experience on my part, if somebody accuses you of wrongdoing, you're a whole lot better off if there's a second person there to back up your story that you didn't do anything wrong. Okay? That's kind of common sense. That's not in a statute anywhere, but it makes a difference. So that's an area, frankly, where your youth protection, you should have a youth protection committee. Your club is big enough and your youth involvement environment is complex enough that you don't want to put just one or two people. And if I heard it correctly a moment ago, you have at least 4 now, and that sounds like a pretty good size. They're going to need to put their, in the old-fashioned phrase again, their thinking caps on about each and every one of your activities and think those through, and come up with your own protocols. You know, we have a district policy for over 50 clubs, some of whom have 8 or 10 members and do almost nothing, and others, like the Akron Club, are responsible for a camp with children with special needs that over the course of a summer, well over 1,000 people take part in. Okay, and there's everything in between, and we can't write a policy that will answer every question for every club, but we can give you some guidelines, some direction. And one of the big pieces of direction is to do exactly what you're doing. Yeah, if you've got somebody who's been through the youth exchange process, I think that's a terrific committee member, by way of example. And they can do, even though we're not ready to roll those vetting processes and the actual training course out, there's a lot of work that you can be doing now as you move in that direction. So when you get there, you have a real good handle on who to tell us needs to be fully vetted versus who needs the much less detailed involvement of just one class. And you are lucky because Evan's in process, but by the time we get there, he will be very well trained in how that works. And your youth protection people have an in-house resource that only one other club in the district will have, and that's still Monroe Falls.
John, thank you very much. It's a very tough subject to talk about. In my regular work life, I am living that every day. So, simple fact is, probably should not have any one-on-one activity. You should always have that second adult or a parent or another 18-year-old present in all of our activities. So thank you again, John, for presenting the program, and we will continue to implement it here in our Hudson Rotary Club.
You reach out to us anytime. I appreciate the time. You guys have a good rest of the day.
Thank you very much. All right, so we have Rotobuck raffle, a little bit lighter topic than our subject matter that we had today. So our payout is 0.00008 of $1 million, or $8.
Oh, how many Bitcoin?
And you might be able to look at a Bitcoin. And our winning number is 717114. 717114.
Whoa.
Jim's got the payout. I trust you that you got it. Nobody else can. That black marble's in there. Came down there. Oh, the black marble. The pot continues to grow. One of my favorite actors is Tom Hanks. So today's dad joke is related to a little bit to Tom Hanks. What is Forrest Gump's computer password? You're so close, Catherine. 1, Forrest, 1. We are adjourned.